Hello, everyone. This is the Ophthalmology Business Podcast, where we help you develop your ideal practice with help of other doctors and experts. The topics we cover include marketing, management, leadership, recruitment, HR, mindsets, and more. I'm Sarah Duval, one of the co-hosts of the podcast. Every listener of this podcast is welcome to join the Ophthalmology Business Academy at www.obacademy.org. The membership is on us, and it's our gift to you. Today, I am excited to talk to John Wiley, founder and CEO of EyeDeal Solutions, about the benefits of utilizing a PEO. So let's jump in. Before we get started, John, why don't you take a minute to tell us about yourself? Who are you? How did you get into ophthalmology? Tell me your story.
Sure. Thanks, Sarah. I really am excited to be here to talk with you on this podcast. I think this is great because your audience is exactly the same audience that I think can get the most benefit from this. So thanks for the invitation.
You're welcome.
Really excited. Look forward to working with you for hopefully years to come. But as you said, my name is John Wiley. I've been in the industry for 27 years. Well, not 27, 26 years. I have done just about everything you can think of in this industry, starting from, carrying a bag, as we call it, as a pharmaceutical rep back in the mid 90s. And then I got into diagnostic equipment, actually worked a couple startups. I was in surgical equipment, even optical. So I just love the passion that eye doctors have for their patients. And that's no baloney. That's just because I've always, I've had opportunities to leave eye care, but I haven't wanted to because it's exactly where, I see growth. I see great human beings. They're altruistic, and to be blunt, they're great clinicians, and some of them aren't the best business people out there. So hopefully podcasts like yours, companies like mine, we can actually help them, get better and better at the business of running the practice per se. So I started this company, EyeDeal Solutions. I just had a vision. The nuts and bolts of it is I had a good friend who is my business partner now, and he's been in the PEO space. And PEO, by the way, stands for Professional Employer Organization. So that's a mouthful. So we just shorten it to PEO all the time. But he's been in the PEO space for almost as long as I've been in eye care. And as I got to learn about what PEOs do, and I know we'll go into that a little bit, but I thought, oh my Lord, what a great concept, what a great business model. They're tried and true. They've been around for almost half a century. I have got to figure out a way to take this and introduce it kind of specifically into eye care. So that was the whole crux and genesis of EyeDeal Solutions, and that's EYEDEAL. I'm sure it'll be in the show notes, but just in case anybody's looking for it. So that's basically what we did. We started this really late 2021. So 2022 was the first full year, and we spent a lot of time getting the foundations laid, finding the right PEOs with which to partner. And learning more about this. And 2023 is going to be a fantastic year.
Good. I hope it will be. I'm glad that we've made a connection now, and I can sit back and watch your ride here. So let's jump into it. What are the back office challenges and issues that you're seeing in eye care practices?
Well, I tell you that you could probably talk about this much more than I can, having, running a practice, but just over the years of sitting back and talking with administrators and doctors and listening to their challenges and their frustrations, that was one of the cruxes where I said, I've got to figure out a way to help. And as well as anybody that you've got, when you're running a practice, you have kind of what we have nicknamed, I kind of nicknamed this the core four, right? Hashtag core four. But it's basically no particular order. These are the four things I think that when you run a practice or a business, right? I mean, medical businesses can do this as well. Anybody can use a PEO. But when you're running a practice, you got to think of things that generate revenue versus things that don't generate revenue. And if you can minimize the drain of the things that generate zero revenue, right? Make those more efficient. That's what you need to do. So the core four really is human resources, all things people related. It's also payroll and all the tax compliance. And here's the big one, probably benefits and benefit administration, because what a cost and time consumption that is. And then the last thing is workers' compensation, which not a big deal in the eye care world, but still by law required in 49 out of 50 states. So the main thing here is if you could figure out a way to take those things and offload, outsource, if you will, but offload those burdens. That's a great thing to do. And a lot of your listeners might say, well, I already do that now. I don't. All right. But if you think about it, how many companies are you using, right? Are you using one company for your payroll, one company for your health insurance, another company for your 401k, another company for your workers' comp? If you're over 50, you might use another company for the FMLA. You might use another company for what's called EPLI, or Employer Practices Liability Insurance. And then if you need HR help, then you go to another company for that. So you're kind of all over the place. So your time is just spread all over the place. And when I think about it, there's a phrase that's used in the PEO world a lot. It's called transactional HR. And it's hard to put a price tag on that, Sarah, but when you think about all the time for the transactional stuff, the paperwork and the I-9s, and then your job descriptions and your employee handbook and all the things that just suck all that time away, if you can find someone who can help you with that, improve your efficiencies and get rid of some of those back office challenges, then I think that it could be huge. What do you think about that? Does that make sense from your standpoint, being, running an office?
It does. It makes a lot of sense. And actually, what I was going to ask you next, why don't I ask you, and we'll go from there. People might be listening to this and saying, "Well, I already have an office manager or administrator or HR doing all of this. So why would we need a PEO?" So let's talk about this right up front here and grab people.
Right. So great question. And when you think about, I got somebody doing that. The role of the PEO, I think it's very important. The role of a PEO is never to necessarily replace anyone, right? Mm-hmm. That's not their job. Matter of fact, the happiest clients, we'll call them, in the PEO space, have someone who's kind of a liaison between the PEO and the business. But the whole idea, the whole purpose is to handle the core four, but never really to replace. So, when you talk about the amount of time that you might spend on HR, the payroll, the benefits, the add deletes, all that, the COBRA, all that. That was another thing. Matter of fact, I know some companies that outsource their COBRA as well. If you're spending, 40, 50% on that, and if you could cut that down to 5, 10%, what could you do with that extra time? My favorite thought is Sarah, and this is not placating to you, but you've been promoted because you're a good employee, right?
Right. So,
if we could take the best employees, and rather than you're behind a closed door punching, on your keyboard all day, if we can help you move you into a position where you do that a little bit, but you're maybe more patient facing, maybe you can figure out how to help the marketing of the practice. You can instill new services, new dry eye clinics. You can make sure that you're reaching out to your referral network. If you have an optical, you can float around the optical, things that actually help the practice grow. So if this is not really helping you grow, it's just what I call a necessary evil, right? So if we could help you to be more efficient, outsource this stuff that generally just is a time suck, and then put you in a position where you can help that practice grow, I think that makes sense. What do you think?
I think it definitely makes sense. And I mean, for somebody like me, for example, I much, much prefer the patient facing things. Like I don't like being stuck in my office just doing administrative work. That's not me. I love interacting with my employees or with patients if I can. So this sounds like a dream come true to, to me personally. And I'm sure many people listening.
Well, I love what you're saying, because I got to be honest with you. I think the only objection here is your question hit the big objection is, but I don't want a PEO because that's going to put me out of, my position. No. That's not what we want whatsoever, because I know there's probably been some pushback. People will be interested and then they'll sit back and they go, well, then that's going to put me out of a job. No, not at all. Matter of fact, I do have a client that they tried to replace a human being with a PEO, and it hasn't gone great because now they had no one to interact with the PEO to help with the payroll, because some data is going to have to be transferred back and forth. And if you didn't have anybody in that at all, it makes it for a little bit of a challenge. So there's been a learning curve with that whole thing. So having somebody who can, have a not day to day, but, weekly conversations with the PEO, that can really be a big benefit. I hope that makes sense.
It does. And one of the things that I'm sitting here thinking about as we're talking is, probably the biggest pain point for all of us as administrators and managers is the fact that we're so understaffed, right? And people are having to fill many different roles. I myself have spent the last 2 weeks, John, 2 weeks ago, I was in our call center. I mean, I was physically in the call center working alongside the girls answering the phones.
Wow.
This past week, almost every single day, I was physically on the front desk working the check-in and check-out because we are short-staffed to begin with. Mm-hmm. People have called out or had different things going on. And I haven't been able to be in my office in about 2 weeks doing yeah, and I'm not exaggerating. This is how it's been. And I kind of don't mind doing it though, because I love interacting with my staff and working shoulder to shoulder with them and showing them that I'm not above that. And I like the interaction with the patients. And so I'm thinking about how something like your PEO could be so beneficial in times like this, especially when we have so many hats to be wearing, so many other things that we can be doing to help. It's mind blowing, really. This
is exciting because you get it, and
yeah, sadly,
yeah, you get that. It's the only job of a PEO is really to help. And when I think about the ideal size of a company, I get that question. Well, how many employees? What's the smallest? Well, there's a lot of one employee companies that use a PEO just because they don't want to deal with it. But I've seen companies with several thousand employees, but that sweet spot is probably somewhere between, 10 and 200. I know that's a big range, but the bigger you get, how many employees do you have at Concord, Sarah?
We have about 125.
Okay. Wow. Perfect. Yeah. So, but and how long have you been there?
Since 2001.
So how many employees were there when you started? Roughly?
Well, when I started, we have kind of a funny story, actually. Concord Eye Center used to be two practices. It was Concord Eye Care and the Eye Center of Concord. I worked for Concord Eye Care. We were a little bit bigger than the other practice, but I would say maybe 50 to 60 employees. And what actually ended up happening is we merged. We were two competitors who merged to maintain an independent practice. That could be a whole other podcast. But yes. So now I would say combined, we're about 125 employees.
Well, that's perfect. I mean, you've seen, as you look at the growth scale, when you hit your 20th employee, things become much tougher. And then when you hit your 50th, oh my goodness, things get really tough, because then you're going to start dealing with FMLA and Obamacare, the ACA, all of these other, these government regulations and things hit at certain numbers. So you're past the 50, but maybe some people out there listening are about to hit 50 or just went over 50, et cetera. PEOs are great for them. we're working with getting some data for 140 person group, which would be great, because to your point, it's going to be, it's really tough because of all the things that are asked about you. Now, you mentioned, or asked of you, and you mentioned earlier about, other benefits of a PEO and for potential employees and back office challenges. When you think about what you're facing, I feel for you, because hiring, your staffing, like you said, is so difficult. But in 2025, an estimated 75% of all employees will be millennials. And you may be a millennial. I'm a Gen X. Doesn't mean anything on paper, but this generation, kind of in general, just to stereotype, they're kind of looking for some different benefits than maybe previous generations. So, the benefits themselves are key. They're looking more, not just money, but they want pet insurance, and they want to be able to make sure their long-term and their short-term is taken care of, a great 401k, and other things that they want. But it's not all about that dollar an hour. I've had so many doctors tell me that they're losing people because they're going to Chick-fil-A or something, and they may make a dollar or two more, or maybe make the same money, but their benefits are better. So PEOs, because there are 487 PEOs at last count, and they actually have it's almost 5 now. So I'll just go ahead and round up. About 5 million employees in the United States are rolled under a PEO window. So what's that mean? Economies of scale, right? I mean, you're 125 people, which is phenomenal. But when you're going to fight for insurance, workers' comp, et cetera, you're negotiating as if you're a 125 person group, right? Mm-hmm. So if you had a PEO that had 200,000, 300,000 in bigger, then, they might have better prices on the benefits. They certainly have better renewals. And if they don't have better prices, they have more options. That's key too, when you want to make offers to, some employees, and you lose them and you don't know why. I offered them the same money or more. It might have been something on the benefit side. So I didn't want to go down too much of a tangent, but I want to make sure that, that we address that.
No, I'm glad you did. This is really interesting. I'm really enjoying this conversation. And I just want to back up the boat. So I'm 44. So I don't know. What am I? I'm not a millennial.
Well, I think you are. No, you could be the tail end of Gen X with me. I'm 54. And the millennials, let's see, my son was born in 2000. I think millennials are born in 80. I think that's right. But
okay, I was the very end of, I was December 24. I'm telling my whole life story. I was 1978. So I don't feel like a quote unquote millennial, but anyway.
I'll take you in my group. You'll be a Gen X with me.
That's neither here nor there. I think people are going to start realizing as they listen to my podcast that I just kind of say random things. You have to put up with my nonsense if you're going to be on a podcast.
That's what's going to make it a great podcast. Exactly.
Sarah and her nonsense. Okay, so let's see. I had a couple more questions.
Sorry to interrupt, but you said something I want to touch on, because you said it could be a whole other podcast. And if you do, I think a roundtable discussion about, maybe buying of practices and private equity and things of this nature, and that might have been where you were going with that. Obviously, you've seen a ton of it, right? Since you've been in this world since 2001, I was since the mid 90s. I've seen tremendous change. And I'll just say this on the private equity side. I'm all in favor, if that makes sense for that doctor, that practice, to sell to private equity, if that's what they want to do, if they're at that stage in their life, by all means. Interesting little caveat. I was at ASCRS last year in DC, ran into a doctor buddy of mine that I called on for years. I hadn't seen him in a while. And he said, "What are you doing now?" And I told him what I'm doing, told him what a PEO does. And it blew me away. He said, "Oh my God, if I knew that companies like that existed, I would not have sold." And I said, "Why is that?" He said, "Because I loved owning the practice. I just didn't like running it." So I thought that was a key takeaway for me. Now, Doesn't mean everyone needs to jump, everyone that's thinking about selling, can talk to PEO. That'd be great if they did. But, if they're 60, 65, whatever, and they want to be able to sail off in the sunset, by all means. But if they're selling because they're frustrated with a lot of the back office stuff, maybe a PEO can come in and help out. So I wanted to make sure I just threw that out there because we're all facing that PE conundrum. I've talked to some administrators and they go, "Oh, I love what you're doing with the PEO." And I said, "You want to talk?" "No, we're just selling. We're selling next month or next year, or we just sold, et cetera." And a little harder in that situation. But I just thought I'd throw that little caveat in there.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you did. There was an article in Administrative Eye Care magazine called "Maintaining an Independent Practice," and it was really a great article. And I think, as we're talking here, that would actually be a really good podcast, I think. And there's so many people that I talk to who are very anti-PE. They want to maintain the independent practice. Would you come back on, John, and do another podcast?
I would love to.
So what's important to attracting and retaining employees? And why do you think employees are leaving jobs right now?
Well, that could also be a whole nother podcast. If you just kind of put aside, the inflation and the rising costs of everything, and employees are really, kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Employees are really looking for something to keep them happy and satisfied. I truly think benefits are a key driver in this area. And like we said, you might have some really good benefits with your particular company right now, but there are a lot of other things out there that will be of interest to some. For example, not just the ancillary, the dental and things. And I mentioned pet insurance. I've done some presentations for some practices, and I had that slide one time about pet insurance, and I took it out, or I was going to take it out, but every time I showed that slide, so many people got excited. They went, "Oh, I'd love to have pet insurance." It was the number one and most exciting thing that they saw. It was all the other stuff. It was like, okay, yeah, long-term, short-term, but then pet insurance was great. But they want to make sure that they're taken care of, and you want to make sure that the companies that you're with providing things like a great 401k. Now, PEOs have tremendous 401ks with very little to no cost. I think that's key, because you could work with a local broker who's a 401k broker, could be a friend of a friend. And then when you go look at the administration fees and all the costs associated with that year over year, you're spending a lot of money. PEOs come in, that cost is very little. They deal with some of the best, most reputable 401k companies out there, like Slavic 401k. That's one of the biggest ones out there. But 401k is huge. I'll also say that if you can provide an employee assistance program, or EAP, you might have it now, but EAPs are great. They're anonymous. You can talk to counselors. You have addiction problems, you have marriage problems, relationship problems. You're grieving, you lost a loved one, you can talk to them. EAPs are phenomenal. Also, something called a PHMP. They love their acronyms, but we're in eye care, so we love acronyms too. That's a proactive health management plan or program. And a PHMP is like, Sarah, if you go to the gym and you have an app, and you can put on there that you're going to the gym and you're not smoking and you're doing these things. But if you're going for walks, et cetera, those types of activities will lower your premium. So it's a benefit to you for your health, but it's also a benefit to you, to your wallet. So these are some of the things that PEOs can offer, which these the new employees really want. And I'll tell you too. So do you personally do some of the hiring and some of the terminations and trying to find somebody, right?
Yeah, sure do.
Okay. Well, you could be using, Indeed. You can use a lot of these different things. There's a lot of different avenues, but PEOs can offer applicant tracking capabilities as well. So they have these really smooth dashboards where everything's located on one dashboard. Your payroll, your 401k, the health insurance, and then on those dashboards, you can have applicant tracking too. So as you post jobs, you can have it all tracked right inside there. So they can help you, weed out and expedite the whole process. So these PEOs have done a great job at realizing that they need to pivot a little bit too. It's not just payroll and work comp anymore. It's the new paradigm that we have, which is the job market. It's so difficult. So that could help speed up some of the processes as well. It's called applicant tracking, and they can do the employee screenings and things of that nature.
So John, in the short time we have left here, what else does EyeDeal Solutions do?
Well, again, man, I've had a blast doing this. I really hope to, continue and talk with you again. Anytime you want me on panels or other podcasts, I'd love to do it because this is the best way to spread the message. But we did start EyeDeal Solutions as a PEO broker. And what I mean by that is we've talked a lot about PEOs, again, professional employer organizations and what they do. And I mentioned that there are 487 at last count. That depends, right? Some are regional, some are national. So Sarah, if we hang up and you go, hey, I like this idea, but I'm gonna go do my own research. So you start Googling them, you're gonna get a few of the big names, but you're gonna get lost, right? Trying to figure out what's the difference. And then if you go to one and you say, what's the cost for this? Well, that's gonna be, they're gonna give you a price. And then you can spend more of your time, hours and hours and days, trying to get competitive bids and do all that. If you got time, great. What we'll do instead is find out what your needs. For example, Sarah, if you go, hey, you know what? Our benefits are great, but man, we need a lot of HR help. We're going through a lot of turnover. We're afraid former employees are going to, file lawsuits, wrongful termination, et cetera. We need a lot of HR help. Well, we've got PEOs that I work with that focus on that a lot more than anything else. So we partnered with a dozen different PEOs, right? These are what I like to think of as the cream of the crop. I spent a lot of time vetting them out to try to find the best of the best. These work in all 50 states. So Sarah, if you got employees over here, but then maybe you go across state lines, there's a whole different tax implication. There's all sorts of stuff that are different. And then if you've got, maybe even PEs themselves, they're in every state, if they're thinking about a PEO. So that's what we did. As a PEO brokerage, or I like to call it a PEO advisory company, we can help guide those, navigate those waters, find the right one for you. And if it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. But in addition to that, we saw a tremendous uptick, if you would, a lot of demand for employee retention credits. That's a crazy world. So ERC, right? And did you guys do that at Concord?
No.
Okay. So there are tons of companies that are trying to come out and do ERC, but so what I did was I partnered with 3 different ERC companies to try to do that same thing as well, try to find the right ERC. And the ERC, is you could get up to $26,000 per employee, right? It's $5,000 per employee in 2020, and it could be up to $21,000 per employee in 2021. And so because the pandemic, and this is the government just trying, it's cheaper for them to do the ERC credits than it is unemployment. So they set aside, I think, $400 billion for ERC monies, and I think only $40 billion has been taken because a lot of people are scared of it. They don't want to get audited. Well, CPAs are great at looking at the money side of things. So ERC looks at it as not just did you lose money, but were you impacted? Did you have patients waiting in their cars during, that especially that second or third quarter of 2020? Did you have reduced capacity to see patients? Did you have, supply chain issues, couldn't get contacts or glasses, et cetera? So if you were impacted and you can quantify that with an ERC's help, you can get more of that tax of those tax credits back. It's all above board. It's what the IRS says that you can do. CPAs are phenomenal. I love them. I have one. One of my best friends is a CPA, but they typically only want to look at it, not did it impact you, but what was the money? So we added a few ERC companies as well. And yes, they take a percentage of what you get back, but you don't owe them anything until that money is in an escrow, in an account. So you don't have to pay up front, and you can, they can tell you how much you're owed. And if you don't want to do it, don't do it. So we started to work with that as well. So we have the PEO advisory and we have the ERC advisory, just to try to help, eye doctors and really any business. But any questions on that? Does that make sense, the ERC? Because it can be confusing.
It does, yes. I think that, I hope that people are getting a lot of value out of these podcasts. And I'm certain that people are going to get a lot of value out of this conversation, John. I personally see, my head is spinning here I personally see so much value in what you offer. Especially like we said, with the times that we're in right now, with so much being asked of us, I see so tremendous value in what you offer. So I really, really thank you for taking the time to come on the show here and to share what you're doing. And I hope that some other people will reach out to you, get you a little business from this.
Well, listen, I appreciate
whether it does or doesn't overnight. Gosh, just it's tremendous what you're doing.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm just trying. I wanted to work for myself, and I wanted to find a valuable service that I think helps people and helps practices, because, like you, I've seen a lot of changes in eye care. Holy cow, I've seen a lot of changes in eye care. And everyone feels like they have to consolidate, and that's, in some ways, that's okay. But if you can figure out some way to offload, outsource some of these things to experts. I mean, that's what they do. They're all certified in all these letters, SHRM certified, PHR, et cetera. So they know this kind of stuff. And I'd love to talk to you offline about it and see if we could help Concord. That would be great, because you'd be a tremendous advocate. If anyone wants to go look at our website, it's just EyeDeal, EyeDeal Solutions.com, all one word. I was lucky to get the .com a couple of years ago. I couldn't believe that. But so it's EyeDealSolutions.com. You're welcome to fire me off an email. It's info@EyeDealSolutions.com. And we can just have a conversation. We'll find out what your pain is. And if there's a way that we can help, great. If there's not, great too. You could tell friends, etc. As you're growing, you're thinking, well, I got to add another HR person. I got to add another HR person, or I've got to do this. I got to do that. I got to outsource this. This is where we can really come in and help make that a little bit more efficient. So this has been great. I really think I've used great too much, but Sarah, I really appreciate the opportunity to share this vision with you and your vision about, the Ophthalmology Business Podcast.
Yeah, it's really great too that you come from an eye care background too. That's really neat. And people can also find you on LinkedIn. Yes, John? Yes, John Wiley on LinkedIn.
John Wiley. I need to crank up my posting again. I used to do a bunch of videos. You're welcome to go in and look at. I try to do small little 2, 3, 4 minute videos about the value, and I'll need to repost those. And I also have an EyeDeal Solutions homepage on LinkedIn, Facebook page as well. Don't do a whole lot on Facebook. I'm still trying to get that one, but I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn.
Baby steps.
Yes.
Baby steps.
And great work on your part on LinkedIn as well. I really see that. So
thank you. So thank you so much, John, for joining us today and talking to us about the benefits of PEOs. We appreciate it very much. I also want to take a moment to thank our listeners. We appreciate each and every one of you. We cannot do what we do without you. If you like our podcast, kindly share it with your friends and on social media. Also, please don't forget to write a review on iTunes or Google Play. Your reviews will help other doctors and practice owners find us. Till we meet again, wishing all of you an amazing week ahead.